You know, also this week you were pretty tough on Donald Trump on one of his positions on abortion. He had 5 different positions that we've counted up this week on abortion. I want to ask you, what is yours? Give me your straightforward position on the issue of abortion.
My position is in line with Roe v. Wade, that women have a constitutional right to make these most intimate and personal and difficult decisions based on their conscience, their faith, their family, their doctor, and that it is something that really goes to the core of privacy. And I want to maintain that constitutional protection under Roe v. Wade. As you know, there is room for reasonable kinds of restrictions after a certain point in time. I think the life, the health of the mother are clear, and those should be included even as one moves on in pregnancy.
When or if doesn't...
So I've had the same position for many years.
When or if does an unborn child have constitutional rights?
Well, under our laws currently, that is not something that exists. The unborn person doesn't have constitutional rights. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't do everything we possibly can in the vast majority of instances to, help a mother who is carrying a child and wants to make sure that child will be healthy, to have appropriate medical support. It doesn't mean that you don't do everything possible to try to fulfill your obligations, but it does not include sacrificing the woman's right to make decisions. And I think that's an important distinction that under Roe v. Wade we've had enshrined under our Constitution.
You had said you're for you think there are room for some restrictions. So is it fair to say that women don't always have a full right to choose?
Well, under Roe v. Wade, that is the law. And as I said, I support the reasoning and the outcome in Roe v. Wade. So in the third trimester of pregnancy, there is room for looking at the life and the health of the mother. Now, most people, not all Republicans, not all conservatives even agree with the life of the mother, but most do. Where the distinction comes in is the health of the mother. And when you have candidates running for president who say that there should be no exceptions, not for rape, not for incest, not for health, then I think you've gotten pretty extreme. And my view has always been this is a choice.
Well, welcome again to another episode of Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short. And today I'm going to be going over the argument of Rachael Held Evans in her Washington Post article, where she talks about her voting. The article is entitled How a Pro-Lifer is Voting Pro-Choice and Why She's Voting for Hillary Clinton. Now, I'm not going to get into the politics of Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. I'm not happy with any of the choices that we have this year, but what I want to talk about is how ridiculous it is for a Christian, a so-called evangelical, to be voting for a pro-choice candidate, still claiming that she's not for abortion, but she's going to be voting for a pro-choice candidate, Hillary Clinton. Now, last week I talked about the different arguments she had, but I'm going to get into the heart of what she's talking about today. She has about 4 points here that she wants to underscore, and so I'm just going to read those and respond to those, because we have to, as Christians, respond to really attacks against the Christian morality. And so she's going to argue, number one, voting pro-choice is not the same as voting for abortion. She writes, regarding the 2016 election, the Washington Post recently declared, for evangelicals, the question has become, which is worse sin, abortion or racism. Now, to quote that headline in the Washington Post is totally unfair. It isn't about which sin is worse, abortion or racism. Because there are people on both sides of racism issue that want to address racism, but they want to address it in a different way. The left, or the so-called progressives in our country, want to shame white people into giving certain minority groups preferential treatment, preferential status before the law, and they think that that is the way to combat racism. Others say, no, you have to be fair and you have to focus on actions of individuals, not race. So if there are people committing crime, you focus on the crime, you focus on the actions of individuals and not what their race is. And so there are whole different ways of approaching the problem of racial divide in this country. But it isn't simply the case that the Democrats are right and the Republicans are wrong. Now, with abortion, we have a clear-cut case. We have babies being killed in the womb every year. 1.5 million in our country killed in the womb every year. So this is something that needs to be stopped. That's how you solve the problem of baby killing or murder. You stop it right away. You stop the baby killing in the womb. And so you don't have to have a big debate about the best way to stop the abortion killings in the womb. You simply, by law, say, this is not acceptable. We will not allow for mothers to kill their children in the womb, and the end of it. But she's trying to say, well, you know, there's abortion, but then there's racism, then there's nuclear war, then there's all this other stuff, and you throw everything together, and all of a sudden you have no clear-cut boundaries, and you don't do anything about abortion. You just debate it all the time. And so she is really not credible here when she's quoting the new Washington Post for saying evangelicals have a question to ask, which is worse sin, abortion or racism. Of course, they're both sin, but the matter is, which one do you address first, murder or racial inequality? And you want to address, of course, murder. You want to stop murder, blood flowing. And you can do that by simply passing a law that says no more abortion. Now, while people quoted in the article above have a far more nuanced perspective, the headline betrays a common but reductive sentiment that people who vote for pro-choice candidates are voting for abortions. Well, they are. They are voting for the promotion of abortion, whether they want to think about it that or not. She goes on, I can't tell you the number of times I've been called a baby killer by conservative Christians, some of whom routinely sent me images of mutilated fetuses during my pregnancy, which is no way to treat any woman regardless of her views on abortion. But characterizing all pro-choice voters as pro-abortion is inaccurate and unfair. In fact, a majority of Americans say abortion should be legal in most cases, even though nearly half believe it is immoral. Even those numbers don't tell the whole story. So I don't know what quoting half of Americans has to do with Christian morality. She seems to be saying, well, you know, half of Americans think this way, so we need to listen. As Christians, we need to listen to what the Bible says. And we need to stop listening to what the polling numbers are saying. 56% of the people in our country may well say abortion should be legal in most cases. It doesn't really matter because God has spoken in His Word, and we need to interpret what His Word says, not interpret what polling data says. While it would be easier to debate one another if reproductive issues fell nearly into black and white categories of right and wrong, good and evil, most of us recognize this is simply not the case. The fact that a woman's body naturally rejects hundreds of fertilized eggs in her lifetime raises questions about where we draw the line regarding the personhood of a zygote. Do we count all those natural abortions as deaths? When does personhood begin? At fertilization, implementation, the presence of brainwaves, or the second trimester. So I can't believe she's making an argument here, but she is making an argument here. And what she's doing is she's trying to say, well, nature naturally aborts. So therefore, abortion isn't a very clear-cut issue. This is totally insane. Nature brings about the deaths of thousands of people through flooding. Nature brings about the death of thousands of people through hurricanes, storms, all kinds of natural causes brings about death. So therefore, do we do away with murder laws? Do we say, well, we can't prosecute murderers because nature brings about all these deaths? And are we going to investigate nature every time it brings about hundreds and thousands of... This is an absurd argument. There is a difference between an intentional taking of a human life and what occurs naturally. If something occurs naturally, it's a tragedy. If something occurs intentionally, like the taking of a life, an unjustified taking of a life, then that is murder and it should be prosecuted. Now, what happens naturally in a woman during miscarriage and all these things, these are tragedies. And many women are carrying a baby in her womb, and then something terribly goes wrong and they lose the baby. That's a tragedy. That's a time for grief, but it isn't murder. And we know the difference. We don't have to bring up these silly arguments about confusing the categories here. And I'm surprised she would even try to bring that up. Most of us would question whether this couple should have been forced to deliver their stillborn baby, or this woman told by her insurance company that terminating a desperately wanted but unviable pregnancy counted as an abortion. Given the complex nature of these and other issues, the degree to which the government should make decisions on behalf of women and families regarding pregnancy is and should be debatable. Again, trying to muddy the water. We have categories for murder. We don't need to be confused by trying to muddy the water and trying to muddy the argument. I think it's safe to say that a few people who vote for Hillary Clinton this year will do so because they want the abortion rate to go up. Every person I've spoken with personally, whether pro-life or pro-choice or somewhere in between, wants the abortion rate reduced. Why? If it's not murder, there's nothing morally wrong with abortion, then what would it matter if the abortion rate went up or down? You see, you have a situation where she's trying to say, well, everyone wants the abortion rate to go down. That isn't true. Most people who are pro-choice, they don't really care. It's not an issue with them. It's not a value with them. They don't personally care. And so that's the problem. The Christian value system values human life in the womb, among other things, and we want that womb, baby in the womb, protected by law through an abortion law. She goes on, that said, I'm concerned about efforts by some in the Democratic Party to move beyond the safe, legal, and rare posture of abortion to one that treats it just as another routine health procedure. Oh, she's worried about the side she's going to vote for, that they're going too radical. The recent comedians in cars getting abortion sketch is a troubling reflection of this trend. Okay, so she is worried about that, but she's going to vote for that party anyway so that they can keep on promoting that kind of thinking so that it spreads in society. That alone, that bothers her. That should be alone one of the major reasons why she doesn't vote for pro-abortion candidates. The second reason, she says, is criminalizing abortion won't necessarily reduce abortions. Recent data published by the Lancet Journal shows that countries where abortion is illegal or have heavily restrictions, mainly in Africa and Latin America, don't have lower abortion rates than the rest of the world. In most of those countries, the rate is 37 abortions per 1,000, compared to 34 per 1,000 in countries where it is legal. In fact, in Latin America, a region with highly restrictive abortion laws, 1 in 3 pregnancies ended in abortion in 10 through 14, higher than any other region. Again, are we talking about surgical abortions or are we talking about chemical abortions? And I think she's talking about surgical abortions. The data underscores an important reality that women will continue to seek out abortions even if they are illegal. This was certainly true in the U.S. before Roe v. Wade and remains true for women who resort to dangerous and clandestine methods of terminating pregnancies in countries where it is illegal. Yes, there will always be those who do seek out illegal abortions, but there won't be as many if there is a law that says this is wrong. And the women who sought abortion before Roe v. Wade, yes, there were. But as many now? No, there are not. So, yes, the law is a teacher. So, if the law is making abortion illegal, there won't be many people seeking abortions. And the argument that, well, they're going to seek them anyway. There will be some, but that doesn't mean that we should base the law on the policy, well, people will still seek abortion, so we shouldn't change the law. What is right and what is wrong? That's the question we need to ask. She goes on, still we have to be careful of comparing apples to oranges when it comes to statistics. Most of the countries where abortion is illegal also suffer from widespread poverty and limited access to contraception, huge drivers in the abortion rate. In addition, some surveys show that here in the U.S., states with more abortion restrictions do in fact have lower abortion rates, suggesting legal changes may indeed have some effect. So with those considerations in mind, I think it's safe to say that all the legal restrictions on abortion might put a dent in the abortion rate. They won't put an end to abortion as we know it, and most importantly, they won't do a thing to alter the number of unwanted pregnancies. Well, maybe they will. If women began to realize that, hey, I can't simply just terminate my child's life if I get into trouble, maybe they won't have as much careless, casual sex. There's a whole consequential chain that goes along. When you begin to promote something that is immoral, more immorality starts. And when Roe v. Wade was passed and made abortion legal, then more women began to have more casual and careless sex, and they begin to have more abortions. It's just going to happen like that. She goes on, rather than waiting around for a hypothetical and unlikely legal scenario to play out, our efforts would be better spent in working to decrease the number of unwanted pregnancies using the tools we already have. Which brings me to my next point. Reducing unwanted pregnancies. Well, one of the methods today is the chemical abortion pill. And so you have to factor in that when you're talking about any kind of curtailing of abortion. Evidently, she's saying that the chemical abortion pill is helping abortions go away. Well, it's helping surgical abortions reduce, but it won't help abortion situation when you're taking a pill. Abortion is abortion, whether it's a pill or whether it's a surgical procedure. She's not factoring that in. Pro-life advocates should support rather than oppose efforts to help low-income families care for their children. So she's using here the argument that, abortion is caused by poverty. Poverty causes abortion because poverty causes unwanted pregnancies, and so on and so forth. Again, this is a misdiagnosis of the problem. It's the old argument that poverty is the source of our problems here in the United States. We just have to spend enough money on programs and all kinds of things that will reduce poverty, and then all of our problems will be solved. Well, that's not the case. She says when President Obama recently announced an initiative aimed at improving the distribution of free or low-cost diapers to poor families struggling to care for their babies, many conservatives sneered, calling it ultimate example of a nanny state. It was frustrating to see an idea that was so obviously pro-life and pro-family get lampooned by the very people who say they want millions of low-income women to have millions more babies. I know I'm not the only one who gets red-faced whenever a self-proclaimed pro-life politician or pastor belittles or demeans welfare queens or moocher moms, seemingly unaware of the hypocrisy of forcing women to have children they can't afford while simultaneously dismantling the social safety net that helps them care for their children. Notice she's saying language like forcing women to have children they can't afford. Forcing women to have children? Who forced the woman to have a child? Who forced the woman to have casual sex? Who forced women to become pregnant? No one. There was no gun put to these women's heads. They had their flings, they had their sexual hookups, and now they are pregnant as a result. Now, the problem is getting women to not take that activity so casually. The problem is not distributing condoms, or is not distributing diapers. The solution is to get people to be more responsible, and you don't promote abortions and expect responsible lifestyle. You'll get the very opposite of that. She goes on, the fact that most women who choose to have abortions do so because they feel they cannot manage the financial burden of carrying out the pregnancy and raising another child. That's true, they feel that way. The latest survey found that 49% of abortion patients in 2014 had incomes of less than 100% of the poverty level, and 26% had incomes 100 to 199% of the federal poverty level. So she's saying that these women feel like they can't afford to raise a child. Well, that isn't an argument against making abortion illegal. That isn't an argument against murdering children. That is a problem of perception. The women feel they don't have enough resources to take care of their child. They don't feel like they can afford to have a child. But feeling and reality is a whole lot different. And if they are wanting to have more resources to take care of a child, and that there are programs to help them take care of a child, that's one thing. But we should not be promoting and helping them murder their child as a solution to a social problem. This is ridiculous to even begin to think in these terms. Her fourth argument is, if we want to dramatically reduce the abortion rate in this country, we must support efforts to make contraception more accessible and affordable. Not only would improved access to contraception impact the abortion rate in the U.S., it would also dramatically reduce maternal and infant deaths around the world. So her assumption is, boy, these women just don't have access to contraception. That's the problem. Well, that is not the problem. That is not the problem. The problem is they are not using contraception, or they are not worried about getting pregnant because they can always have an abortion. And that thinking needs to be stopped. We need to make abortion illegal. We need to show that it is murder, and we need to have women take responsibility for their activities and stop getting pregnant before they're married. Because in the older days, marriage was the time you got pregnant because you had a husband and a source of resources there to help you raise your child. If you continue on thinking that you can always get an abortion if you get pregnant, you will get pregnant because you will treat the whole matter casually. She goes on, there are more than 220 million women in developing countries who don't want to get pregnant but who lack access to family planning information and contraceptions. Every year, nearly 300,000 of them will die during pregnancy or from complications giving birth, and many more will permanently be disabled. More than 2.6 million babies will be stillborn, and another 2.9 million will die before they are a month old. Okay, these are definitely statistics, but the fact remains, just giving women contraception will not solve the abortion problem. It is not a drug problem. It is not a physical, we have to get these contraceptions into the hands of women problem. It is a responsibility problem. You have to teach women and teach citizens that abortion is murder. It will not be done in a society that respects human life. And when you get that into the thinking, then women will be more responsible. You can't get it into their thinking as long as you have abortion as legal, because they will always fall back on abortion. If the contraception fails, if something happens, if they change their mind, maybe they wanted to get pregnant but now they don't want to be pregnant, they can have an abortion. It just breeds irresponsibility in women and men. So these arguments are really bad. And as Christians, we need to say, look, you can vote for a pro-abortion Democrat who will continue to promote abortion. You can say, well, you're pro-life, but you're going to vote for her anyway because you like some of her other policies. But you are not prioritizing properly. The Christian faith prioritizing human life. We promote human life. We do not want to see abortion promoted in any way. And we need to cut through this fog. We need to cut through this smoke and say, look, if you're going to vote for a pro-abortion candidate, then you are responsible for promoting more abortions in this country. There's no other way around it. You can rationalize it. You can try to rationalize it with statistics. You can try to rationalize it and say, well, you know, we want to cut the number of abortions. But that's smoke and mirrors, because we all know chemical abortion is the new reality. Surgical abortions may be reduced, but you're still aborting babies through the pill, the chemical abortion pill. And so it doesn't make sense to vote for a pro-abortion candidate. You should never vote for Hillary Clinton. No Christian should even consider Hillary Clinton as a candidate to vote for. With her radical abortion stand, she disqualifies herself from all consideration by any biblical Christian. And I would encourage you to not buy into the lies of the people like Rachael Held Evans. She is not giving you the truth. She is twisting and confusing statistics. She is confusing priorities. She is not speaking and promoting a consistent biblical worldview. The only consistent biblical worldview says we should vote only for pro-life candidates. They may not be as good economically, they may not be as good foreign policy-wise, but if they're pro-life, they have the basic assumptions down of a Christian worldview, and we need to consider them and vote for them rather than the pro-abortion candidate. So I hope that's helped clarify you today. We're going to look at some other things in the weeks ahead, so you want to stay tuned. We're going to be analyzing the different moral positions. I'm not going to get into the politics of the 2016 election. I'm going to talk about moral and spiritual issues because I'm a pastor, and my expertise is the moral and spiritual and theological issues. But we do have to concern ourselves with other Christians who are supposedly arguing Christian reasoning and saying they're voting for pro-choice Hillary Clinton. No, that doesn't make any sense, and don't fall for that lie. Well, we'll see you back here at another episode of Christian Answers. God bless.